Let's get joined up. This week's show is sponsored by Bandcamp.com, an online record store and music community where passionate fans discover, connect with, and directly support the artists they love. There's thousands of bands and artists on there, including my band, the Rye Dogs, whose second album, Pigs Might Fly, is out right now. Here's a quick snippet of the title track, which is also available on Spotify, Amazon, and Apple Music.
Because your eyes may be weeping, but your conscience is sleeping. So baby, don't you cry. Your faces are drying and you say...
It's totally free to join Bandcamp, and as the Rye Dogs are brand new members, we're now looking to grow our fan base, so your support would be greatly appreciated. Just search the Rye Dogs, that's W-R-Y Dogs, and hit the follow button. Right, now we can cue the theme tune.
Joined up writing.
Hello and welcome to the Joined Up Writing podcast, where a little procrastination can go a long way. I'm Wayne Kelly and it's episode 170 with Eamon Summers, debut author of Dolly Considine's Hotel, a new book set in Ireland during the 1980s and 1950s. Eamon's got loads to say about his approach to writing, his path to publication, and getting to grips with self-promotion and social media when you think of yourself as shy and retiring. A quick word from me first. Last time we spoke, I told you I was beginning the agonising process of submitting my book to agents. Well, now we're a couple of weeks on and I've sent a total of 7 submissions. No news yet, good or bad, to report so far. And until I start to get rejections or any kind of feedback, I won't be sending any more subs out for the time being. As ever, I'm preparing for the worst and hoping for the best, but either way, I'll keep you posted, I promise. In the meantime, thoughts continue to churn on the next book, whatever it is that I'm going to write next. I've written what may or may not be an opening scene involving a new character, and I've had some positive feedback from a writing group. But it's one thing having a potential protagonist and another to know if he's got the legs for an entire novel. I've got a sense of what I want to write about in terms of themes and a general sense of some plot, but I want to keep thinking, making notes and filling in more of the blanks before I really get my head down. I've even got a title I'm happy with, but I'm keeping tight-lipped until I know for sure that this is the one. And how will I know if this is the one? Well, I suppose it's like when you start a new relationship, you just don't know, do you? Or maybe you do know, I don't know. I'd love to hear how you do it, how you settle on the idea that will then become your next soulmate, or work in progress wise anyway, and how you make the call whether to invest several months or years into this crazy idea that you've just dreamed up. So let me know about that, but also how you're getting on with all your other writing related concerns. So get in touch to tell me what you're up to, and feel free to fire questions at me as well. The best way to get in touch is via email, wayne@waynekellywrites.com, but you can also tweet me at JU Podcast or drop me a line on the FB page. Also, don't forget to join the email mailing list at joinedupwriting.co.uk. It's totally free and you'll get a couple of downloadable goodies when you sign up, and you'll be the first to find out about upcoming shows and events. Okay, let's hear today's interview with Eamon Summers. So Eamon began his lifelong interest in learning about storytelling with classes at the People's College in 1970s Dublin, before going on to study at London's Goldsmiths and later at Birkbeck College. His short stories have been published in literary magazines including Tees Valley Writer, Automatic Pilot and Chroma, and his debut novel, Dolly Considine's Hotel, is out right now and available everywhere you can buy books. So enjoy the chat, and I'll pop back at the end for a sign-off.
Joined up writing.
Okay, Eamon, thanks a million for joining me on Joined Up Writing. I really appreciate it. So why don't you just start off just telling us how things are going and give us a sense of where you're speaking from?
I'm speaking from London. I live quite near Paddington. It was very nice during lockdown because we have Hyde Park is just a 10-minute walk away.
Nice.
So it was really nice.
Get out,
when we
get
were
some fresh air.
Absolutely, yes. But it gets very busy sometimes in summer. We get a lot of tourists around, and sometimes they don't know how to use the footpath properly.
I know where you're coming from. And how's everything else going? Is everything else going all right in your world and in your writing world?
Yes, I think so. Yeah, I'm working on a not a follow-up, but on another novel at the moment.
Oh, that's great.
So it'll be some time. I haven't got a publisher for it yet.
No, you're still working on it.
Yes.
Well, why don't we start off by you telling us about your current book, so your latest book, which is Dolly Considine's Hotel. Tell us
That's
a little
right.
bit about that.
Well, it's set mostly in the summer of 1983. Julian Ryder, whose real name is Paddy Butler, but he's retitled himself for A Summer Adventure. His friend and he were supposed to go off touring somewhere, and at the very last minute, his friend's parents stop him going and seize the money that they were going to use. And so Julian finds himself in a dangerous position because his brother is coming home, and the money that they were going to use to finance their adventures, they got by selling his brother's records.
Oh.
And he has to be out of the house when his brother is home for his mother's 50th birthday. So he goes through a series of accidents or coincidences or good luck. He ends up as the lounge assistant, a live-in lounge assistant in a hotel in Dublin that caters mainly for late-night drinking sessions for politicians and theatricals. And that's run by Dolly Considine. So it moves between the 1950s and the 1980s, telling Dolly's backstory. And Julian is an aspiring writer, and he starts making up tales about the people who come into the hotel, and indeed about Dolly and her family and the other members of staff. And they don't take too kindly to him snooping around and making up stories. And well, it's a politically lively time in the early 80s in Ireland, and there's a lot of suspicion around. So he gets in trouble, and
then obviously adventures ensue, or misadventures.
Absolutely.
Brilliant. So do you remember kind of what the jumping off point was for the story, or what the kind of inspiration was?
Well, it's a good question. I think there were a number of things. One was I worked in a hotel, not unlike Dolly Considine's hotel, when I was quite young, very briefly, and it was a hotel without any bedrooms, but the licensing laws permitted hotels to sell alcohol late at night if you were what they called a bona fide traveller, I think it was. And the hotel that I worked in had sometimes as many as 100, 150 guests, even though it had no bedrooms, and they were all signed in for the night.
Yeah, just so they could have a late drink.
Yes, so a lot of people, the authorities in some way were turning a blind eye to it. I've never quite understood why, and I suppose that was my starting off point.
Kind of started you thinking about it.
Yes,
and obviously you've got lots of you tackle different issues and different themes in the book. So kind of what came first for you, do you think? Because I know different writers do it in different ways. Some writers think, right, I really want to write a story about whatever, a specific part of politics, or it might be something to do with relationships or whatever. And some writers start with a couple of characters in a story and off they go, and then out of that comes that. Like I know Ian Rankin, sometimes he'll kind of keep a file of sort of things that he would like to write about, like big themes, or it might be social issues or whatever it is, and then a kind of story grows from there. How do you kind of work?
I was living in Dublin in the 1980s, and which is not the period in which I had the working experience. It was much, much earlier than that. But in the 1980s, Ireland was quite repressed, and there was we lost a divorce referendum. We lost the right to abortion referendum. We'd barely made condoms legal. We'd only just come out of a period when you needed a doctor's prescription for a condom, which was a certificate of marriage. So it was pretty weird.
Yeah.
So and it just seemed to be getting worse and worse and worse. So I wanted to set it in that time and give a sense of, although I think it's a humorous take on the time. It's not by any means a misery memoir or anything like that.
No. And I suppose living through it at the time, as you say, and you kind of, I'm guessing you had to find the funny side of it anyway, otherwise you'd go crazy.
Absolutely, yes. Well, I was made redundant in 1984. So, and my partner decided he was coming to the UK to do a postgraduate degree. So that's I took my chances, and we both came over together, and it all worked out very well for us. So when I was writing it, in retrospect, as it were.
With the kind of nostalgia turned up.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah. It's so often easier to do that when you go away from somewhere, isn't it?
Yes, much easier.
Things always look better when you look back like that, when you're away from it.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
So I enjoyed writing it, and it developed. It was strange how the various layers and the Julian's fantasies about characters and the ghosts that inhabit the hotel, none of whom I actually met in my own time, it came to play a part in the story. And it's quite a smorgasbord, I think I'd call it, of stories and characters.
Is this the first attempt that you'd made at writing a novel or something long like this, or was this like the one that kind of stuck? Because lots of people, in terms of the first one that gets published, it's not always the first one that they write.
Absolutely, no. It's probably the third. If the fifth, probably I've attempted.
Yeah.
But the third I've finished.
Yeah. Distinction there, isn't there? Definitely.
Yeah. So I wrote an earlier novel, the middle one. The one just before that, and I liked that, and I was very happy with it, and I sent it out to agents, and I got an awful lot of rejections, except for one agent who really liked it, and we worked on it for about 6 months to try and bring it into a marketable state. And he was satisfied after about 6 months and took it to the market, but he couldn't find a publisher for it. So he said to me, "Put it in your bottom drawer, Eamon, and write something else."
Yeah.
And I did that, and that was the birth of Dolly. But when I gave him Dolly several years later, he had moved on, and he wasn't involved in the same market anymore. And
yeah, it's difficult, isn't it? Timing is everything, as they say. So tell me a little bit about how you got into writing in the first place. What's your kind of earliest memory of writing? Have you written kind of, from an early age, or is it something you found later in life?
No, pretty nearly from an early age. Yes, I mean, in my school times, in secondary school, I was writing essays and stuff like that, and trying to write what I might call socially conscious essays, which didn't go down that well with the teachers, who thought I should be, much more frivolous or something. I don't know, but I never got good marks or encouragement for it.
Yeah.
But then when I left school, and I found the People's College, and I did some journalism courses and creative writing. People's College is a trade union financed organisation in Dublin, which they're equivalent here in London. I know there's the Working Man's Club and school. Very similar sort of operation. So I was writing, teenage angst stuff a little bit for a little while.
As most people do, yeah.
I suppose, yes. I never managed to get into the misery poetry, though. But
no, me either. I wrote bad songs for a while.
Well, I wish I understood songs. They seem to be, if you're good at it, you make some money out of it. But there we go.
So you kind of did that, and you kind of wrote. Do you remember kind of the first time somebody actually, or either yourself realised, or somebody other, sort of said, "Oh, actually, you've got a bit of a talent for this," or they kind of spotted something in you?
Yes, yeah. Out of the People's College, I had some newspaper articles, which were about being unemployed. Must have been unemployed at the time. I wrote a thing about being unemployed and on the dole and stuff like that, which was published. It was a series of articles in the Dublin newspapers, but I was really interested in fiction, and I wrote several short stories around that time, and tried a novel. I began to write a novel about 1986, I think, my first one. But it was a bizarre time in my life. My marriage was breaking up, and I was not in a good place. And eventually, my marriage broke up, and I came out as gay and moved out and started a whole new life.
Yeah, there was a lot going on.
There was a lot going on. So I abandoned that.
Yeah.
I abandoned that in order to try and sort my life out. I decided there was something maybe more important than writing.
yeah, your life. Do you think it might not have been right at the time, but it might have been since then or whatever? Has writing kind of, because a lot of people talk about writing as therapy for some people, not for everybody. Do you think that writing has helped you, deal with certain things in your life or get through traumas or whatever?
Totally. I know when I don't, if I don't write, I go down. So it is therapy, and it's not always obvious why it's therapy, as it were. But and in some ways I think of Dolly Considine's Hotel as a little bit like Freud's Little Joe or Little Mary or whatever it was, the titles of his the books he wrote about his clients.
Yeah.
But it's not autobiographical in any true sense of the word, but it's certainly autobiographically influenced, if you know what I mean.
Sure, you've had some similar experiences, or you can at least relate to the period and the setting and stuff like that.
Yes,
absolutely. And so, when do you remember how it felt when somebody actually sort of told you that, I think you can do this, or do you kind of remember that?
I'm not sure that it's ever really happened.
That's not true.
I've done lots of classes and courses and stuff like that, and generally, I would go to them and actually, I'll tell you a story. The first time I started writing Dolly Considine's Hotel, when I started writing it first, I was working in Haringey, I think, and I was on a 3 or a 4 day week, and I wanted to do a writing course at the City Lit, and the only writing course that they had available was one for blocked writers. Mm-hmm. So I went along and I joined, and I would go it was during the daytime, so it worked well with work time. So, and the first opportunity I got to read, I read the first chapter or first something like that, and the rest of the group burst out in applause,
wow,
because they liked the writing, and
that must have felt good.
It felt weird, and resulted in me not writing another word of it for 5 years.
Right. Mental note: don't give Eamon any praise.
Absolutely. But also, I would go to classes, and I'd never get any detailed feedback. They'd say, "Right, that's good, Eamon. Thank you. Next." If you were in a workshop and going
very
round,
helpful, though, is it?
It's really not. No, it's if you're self-confident and I suppose sometimes I come across as confident, but I am probably more so now. But then it was, I needed details, and I'm not sure that I got that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think critique, it cuts both ways. I know, don't get me wrong, it's great to find out whether something's working or not. I think that's brilliant. But if, I've had it before where, through no fault of their own, sometimes it's because they don't like giving critique, or maybe they don't know how to give critique. But some people will literally just say, "Oh, this is really good, I like it," And
Yes.
That's great, you know, as I say, if you're trying to find your way and get an idea moving or find if something's got legs, but it doesn't help you get better, does it, or improve, you know, as a writer?
Not very much, no.
I think critique. I'm always talking about critique groups on here, but I think if you can find a good critique group or a critique partner or something, I think it. You know, I know speaking personally, when I joined my first sort of critique group many years ago now, but the very first time I went and I read out a piece of my work, I mean, and it did pretty much, not ripped apart is probably exaggerating, but it did get lots and lots and lots of, you know, I was told lots and lots and lots of things were wrong with it, but they were very specific. And I absolutely loved it. I learnt more in that first session than I'd probably learnt the previous 10 years of writing on my own, if you know what
Absolutely.
I mean.
Yes, I do. Yes. I'm in a group now, which I've found through the Society of Authors, and there are about it's revolving, but about five people in it at the moment. And yes, I get excellent feedback, both positive and picky.
Yeah, that's right. It's not so much that it's negative, is it? It's just helping you to make improvements. That's the thing. It's like, you know, taking something, telling you whether there's something in it, and then telling you or giving you a sense of how you could make it even better or polish it or whatever.
Yes.
Because you can read something to yourself over and over and over again, but you're only going to find so many things. So I definitely think it's good to kind of get some feedback from people if you can. But I also understand some people find it, you know, daunting and a bit frightening.
Absolutely. Well, I don't find, well, yes, do I? I struggle to say things to them back, as it were. But
Right.
but I seem to have managed it.
Well, that's it. I think it's good practice. I do think you're right, though. I think when you first start doing it, I certainly felt like that when I first joined my critique group, because I was the new person there. And I thought, well, you know, what can I tell these guys? They've been here ages. They've been writing and coming to this critique group. But everyone's got a different perspective. And often I found in different groups, different people have kind of got different things that they're good at focusing on. Like you normally get at least one person in the group that's really good at sort of logistics or picky feedback. So they'll say, yeah, I noticed that when he picked up the cup it was in his left hand, and then later on you said it was the right, which I would never spot anything like that.
Yes.
Or I've had people say, yeah, somebody said to me recently, oh yeah, you said that they had a Greg's coffee and you said it was in a styrofoam cup. Greg's don't do styrofoam cups.
Absolutely.
It's cardboard. So it's things like that, and I'm like, well, I would never even know that. So or you know, or think that it was an issue, so they'll kind of pick it out. So I think that's really good. And then you'll get somebody that's, you know, the real kind of writing person and say, well, you know, I've picked up quite a lot of repeats there, or you use that word lots of times, or you know. So I think it's I always say to people, I know it's some people they say they don't want feedback, or they're really good at self-editing, and that is a skill in itself, but I still think there's room for getting a decent critique of somebody if you can.
Absolutely.
So put yourself out there. The first one that I went to, it was actually one where you stood up and you read your work out loud, and so that was like an added. And I've said that to some people, and they've said, "Oh my God, no, I could not do that. I could not read my own work out." But there was something in reading it out loud anyway. That before you even got the critique, I'd often hear things myself when I was reading it out to the group, because I was kind of like ultra sensitive to it. I was thinking, oh no, I can hear that. I've just repeated the same word there 3 times in the same paragraph, or that paragraph, that sentence was really difficult to read. So there's obviously something wrong with that sentence, or I tripped over a word or whatever. It's good from that point of view. So sorry. I
was going to say that I do find, especially when I'm in the UK, that people, if I read out something in my own accent, they get the work much better than if they were reading it. Yeah. Which is really interesting. But
it is, yeah. And again, I mean, there were people in my critique group, there were some people that were really, really good at reading out, and it kind of added something to it, and you, as you say, you got a real sense of it. But equally, there were people that really weren't very confident at reading out, and they weren't very good at reading it. And sometimes it kind of influenced how you felt about the writing. You think, oh, they're writing, you know, I'd like to see that on the page because it seems a bit stilted, and then you'd read it and it'd be absolutely brilliant. And it's kind of like they weren't really doing it justice. So, as you say, I think it's good if you get to do both, if you can see it.
I think all writing courses should include reading hints, helping people to read properly.
Definitely, yeah, and critique. I think actually giving critique is a big thing, because again, it's sometimes and again the way that we used to do it in that group, because we were actually writing the first time you give critique, the first time you heard was when you heard it, so you were kind of having to listen to it and write notes as you heard it for the first time. You didn't really get time to sort of think about things too much. But that was the first time I started doing it, I thought, I'm not going to be able to think of anything to say. I'm not going to be able to give any critique on this. But then it's kind of a skill you develop. It's
it's an amazing skill. I definitely don't have it. I go to open mic sessions and you see the, whatever you call it, the organizer or the MC, and immediately they stop and they pick out 3 or 4 images from a poem that I thought had nothing in it. And
don't get me started on poetry. Somebody came, we at the group, somebody actually, I think it was an English teacher, and his speciality was poetry, and he came in and he actually did like a sort of an hour-long or 2-hour-long session once, and sort of told us or gave us some hints on how you should read poetry, and that was actually really helpful. You know, saying, look at all the stuff that's in this poem, and I kind of, you know, you kind of sense some of it, the imagery in different bits and pieces, but then he'd say, well, the reason that this is phrased like this is because he's trying to evoke this and that and the other, and it is interesting. But no, I'm the same. I don't read I think what it is I don't read enough poetry.
Yeah, me neither.
That's what it is, to kind of get it. So give us a sense of actually how you write, when you write. So if you were sitting down to write a new book tomorrow, what would that? How would you go about it? Would you start off with a scene? Would you do a bit of planning? Does it vary depending on what you're writing?
I think it depends on what I'm writing. Yes, I did a great course again during lockdown. Has been wonderful in some ways. Obviously, on balance, we shouldn't have. It was a bad thing. But there were some good things about COVID. And one of them was that I could do courses and do reading, do open mics around the country without having to travel to them. But I did a great course with an American poet, actually, in New York. I go to bed at 9 o'clock or something on a Thursday night and get up at 1:45, and then we had this class until 3 or something, 2 or 3. But it was wonderful, and she would just, and I've had inspirational writers sessions before, but nothing seemed to work quite so well as this one. Maybe it was because I was getting up and waking up and wasn't in full control of my my senses. But I wrote, you know, jumping off points where I would write 200 words in a couple of minutes, and it would look like something that could go somewhere if I wanted to. So out of that, and I think that's the way I would start anything that I was going to do in the future. And if I know the characters, writing, I've written a couple of short stories about individual characters in another book that I worked on for a little while. I've temporarily suspended it because I wanted to work on the new one that I'm working on. But I'll get back to it. So those kind of things, working around the characters and asking them questions and making notes about them, rather than, unless I know the story, obviously it's easier. If I know the story, then I can just start writing, and then I'll come back and fill it in later. Put the structure in later, as it were. But I'm definitely not a good plotter and anything like that.
You like to sort of find your way through the writing?
I do. The story emerges, I guess. It would be partly true.
What would you say is your favourite part of the whole process? Is it that bit at the beginning? Is it when you get going? Is it writing? Is it editing?
Well, it's both. Well, certainly the first bit and the last bit. I love editing, I have to say.
That's good.
I think it's it's fascinating that I can read something today and come back a week later and think it's awful and make it better again.
You like being able to do that. And do you, when you've kind of finished the first draft and you're kind of looking back and you're trying to sort out, you know, the wheat from the chaff and which bits go where and the structure and everything else, how do you kind of deal with those bits? Because that can be quite daunting, that first, when you first go back to the whole thing and you try and put it into some kind of order before you get down to line edits and things.
Yes. Not so much with Dolly, but with this new one that I'm working on. When I did it initially, I moved back and forth between time, and I had an assessment done on it, and the guy said, "Oh no, this is just awful. You've got 50 different time frames, and some of them we're meeting we're hearing about characters and interacting with, watching them interact with each other, and we're not introduced to them until another 50 pages."
Yeah.
And he said that was, just rubbish. So but I like playing around with time, but it has to be properly planned, or it just doesn't work. So at the moment, I'm definitely structuring everything in strict chronological order. And if later I decide to play around with it, it's not ready for that yet.
Absolutely. So you kind of mentioned there you had like an editing assessment or whatever, which,
yes,
a lot of people do, obviously, depending on budget and everything else. So tell me a little bit about that. How did you find that? How did you find that experience, and kind of what did you get out of it? Because there'll be people listening to this, new writers particularly, that won't have tried anything like that. So
the TLC, the literary consultancy, they do assessments. One of them they do is for underrepresented groups, people who might be consider themselves to be underrepresented in writing.
Sure.
And they do a free assessment of the first, I think, 10,000 words or something like that of a novel. So I was in the lucky position that I could afford to upgrade to the full amount, but I got credit for the bit that was free.
Mm-hmm.
But I was lucky to be able to afford it at that particular time.
Sure.
And yeah, I found it very helpful, and I was amazed at the insight and indeed the length of the report.
And what sorts of things? I mean, obviously, you mentioned there, you talked about the timeline and things. What sorts of other things do they tend to cover, or did they cover in your assessment?
I think that was certainly the main one. I think motivation was another one. I tend to write characters that on the surface appear to be passive. And allow things to happen to them, or
that's really common with first drafts anyway, though, I think. And I think particularly and especially when you first start writing longer things, I think that's kind of a lot of people, and it's the same goes for screenplays and all sorts of different things. I think, like you say, you sort of think, right, now I need to think of things to happen.
Yes.
And so you just make lots of things happen, and then you realise when you get to the end of the first draft or whatever, or somebody points it out to you, yeah, if you took your main character out of this, all these things would still happen into them. So, but you found that useful. So when you got that report back, how did you feel? Were you kind of, were you fired up by it? Were you kind of, did you initially think, oh God, there's loads of work to do on this or whatever?
Well, I definitely thought there was loads of work to do. Yes, for sure.
Yeah.
But he said enough positive things for me to know I could make it work. I'd have to work hard, but I could make it work. And yeah,
that's good. So give us a bit of a sense of your path to publication. So, as regards with Dolly, so you're published with Unbound, aren't you? Tell us, for people that don't know what Unbound is, explain that to us.
So Unbound is a traditional publisher, but they they tend to publish books that are never going to make $1 million. Books that they think are worthy of publication, but will never sell a huge number of books. Mm-hmm. And so to reduce their financial risk, what they do is they set up a crowdfunding campaign on their website, and then it's up to the author to drive traffic to it, as it were, to use the vernacular, and get people essentially to pre-buy the book. Yeah. So that when the fund is when enough books are sold, and it's not just buying books, but mostly mine was certainly mostly buying books. Yeah. Other people offer things like some writers, for instance, offer to do workshops and to do one-to-one sessions with other writers, and eventually it took about 6 months, I think, which wasn't too bad, because some people it takes a lot longer. Yeah. And once the fund is raised, then they appoint an editor and a designer, and the traditional role kicks in. They do some marketing, but what's fascinating is I had very little experience of social media, but fundraising just is like baptism of fire, and you just dropped into it and you have to take it on. And I was telling someone yesterday that I thought I was shy and retiring, and he said, well, I never thought of you as shy and retiring, but I certainly wasn't I believe I was when I started the fundraising, but I soon developed a thick skin.
And so when you hit your target, tell us how that felt, and then kind of what happened after that.
Yes, so they then send it out to an editor, and I started working with a wonderful woman in Oxford who was very enthusiastic about it, understood, got what I was trying to do, and helped me to make it even better.
That's great. And how did you find that whole process?
Working
wonderful. With an editor.
Oh, I loved it so much. In fact, I liked it so much that I've been hoping to work with her again on this new novel in a private capacity.
That's good. So you think you've got a bit of a relationship with her now?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. So if you were kind of starting out again tomorrow, Eamon, would you do anything differently? Or what would you tell your younger self, do you think, as regards writing?
God.
Not life. We haven't got that long, Eamon.
Yeah, no. I think academia is important, and I feel a bit of an underdog because I never really. I have a 2-year certificate in creative writing from Birkbeck, but it's nothing compared to an MA from Goldsmiths or one of those, or indeed the University of East Anglia, which I guess just give you a leg up and give you confidence. And give it to you at an early age. I mean, I'm developing some confidence, but I'm 70 years of age. It's
70 years young, as they say.
Yes, but it's publishers want to be able to visualize a career.
Sure.
And it's easier to visualize a career with somebody who's in their 20s and has produced a rubbish novel with a kernel of goodness in it.
Yeah.
Then
it is. Saying. They think, well, I can invest. I've got time to invest in this person, and
yes.
But I mean, I agree, but I think it's kind of it is a little bit skewed that way sometimes, and I think we miss out on certain voices and life experiences and all the rest of it. And the same goes for what you were saying about academia as well. I mean, I haven't got a degree myself, and I know exactly where you're coming from.
Yeah.
That's kind of an insecurity that I've had at various different times. I'm finally kind of shaking it off as I meet more people and kind of share my work and all that kind of thing.
Absolutely.
Because I think you can either write or you can't to a certain extent. I'm not saying that you can't learn, but I do think some people have a natural affinity with it whether they've had a degree level education or not. Really, you get
Yes.
in my grandma, my now late grandma, she never had, she left school when she was 14, but she wrote, she secretly wrote poetry all of her life.
Wow.
Which we kind of only found out much later on in her life, unfortunately. And the spelling and all that kind of thing, and the punctuation was all over the place because she'd never been taught. But that didn't matter. What she was actually saying, and the poems were, they were beautiful. Like they had something to say in her own way. And again, like you say, because of how things are set up, and people assume certain things, that you get a certificate from a university or whatever. It's like you're going to be brilliant at it. I definitely think you can learn the craft.
Absolutely.
But, anybody can learn that from practicing it, and also from reading books and things. And reading fiction, you can learn a lot if you know what you're looking for.
And that's the other thing. Read. Write. Read.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree. So with that in mind, do you think if you could go back to tell your 20-year-old self, anything, or to do something differently or whatever, or what piece of advice do you think?
I maybe to be a bit braver. Yeah.
Be brave.
And just, I don't know. I think if you and excuse me if I'm exploiting anything, but if you come from an insecure working class background, and you think you're next, if I don't work today, what will I do tomorrow? I'll starve tomorrow. I'll have nothing to eat tomorrow, and that's something you have to shake off as well. And if you can trust yourself, or it's possibly chances are even less nowadays than they were previously.
Yeah, I know, which is sad, but I agree. Yeah, I think the division is the gap is even wider, it seems, at the moment. So, kind of as we move to wrapping things up then, so can you give us obviously don't spoil it too much yet, because I know you're still working on it, but can you give us a sense of what's going to be next for you, and also tell people where they can find out more about you and your work online?
Well, eamonsummers.com will take them to my website, and there's lots of information there about me. There's an extract from Dolly to read. Brilliant,
so they can check out that as well. And can you give us a sense of what you're working on at the moment without going into too much detail? Because I know
it's about it's about a man who gave sexual services to other men in a public toilet in the west of Ireland. And he runs into some difficulties, and things get changed.
That's a good one. Runs into some difficulties. I like that. I can see that on the back cover there. And he runs into some difficulties. I'm sure he does in that part of Ireland as well. Absolutely. Okay, well, it's been great to talk to you, Eamon. It's been brilliant, and obviously good luck with the book going forward, and good luck with the one that you're working on at the minute as well. But for now, thanks for coming on Joined Up Writing.
Thanks, Wayne. It's absolutely lovely to have spoken to you. It's a real privilege to appear on Joined Up Writing.
Joined Up Writing.
Okay, thanks again to Eamon, and I'll put all of his links in the show notes over at joinedupwriting.co.uk, or you can find them in the podcast description on whatever device you're listening to this on. That's pretty much it for this week, but don't forget to get in touch with all your thoughts on the show, your feedback, and to tell me what's going on in your writing world. And you can do that by dropping me an email at wayne@waynekellywrites.com. Also, remember you can find the entire back catalogue of interviews on the website. Make sure you subscribe at Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, Overcast, YouTube, or wherever else you get your podcasts from, and that way you can have the podcast downloaded automatically every time. Also, remember to leave us a nice rating and review on Apple Podcasts, or a nice comment on YouTube, because it really does help others to find the show. Or, just tell somebody with your mouth. That would be great. So that's it for this week. Thanks for listening. I'm Wayne Kelly. Happy writing, stay safe, and I'll see you next time.